Mr. Chair, council members, and participants, we are now live.
Good morning, everyone. The meeting of the Committee on Transportation and Public Utilities has now begun. I understand that the state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, city council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing. Notices that are published in the Daily News, Enquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. Will the clerk please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that they are present when their names are called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak.
David O.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, colleagues. I am present. Thank you.
Alan Dom.
Well, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, and I'm here also.
Derek Green.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, public. First council hearing of the spring.
And Kendra Brooks.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues.
Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. And it's good to see everyone as well. This is the public hearing of the Committee on Rules. This is the public hearing on the Committee on Transportation and Public Utilities. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. I would like to take a brief pause for a second. Thank you. This is the public hearing of the Committee on Transportation and Public Utilities regarding Bill number 210137. Would the clerk please read the title of the bill?
Bill number 210137, amending Title 22 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Public Employees Retirement Code, by creating an early retirement program for certain employees working in or with the Department of Commerce, Aviation Division, and making certain technical changes, all under certain terms and conditions.
Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for the questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Will the clerk please call the panel for Bill number 210137?
Rochelle Cameron.
Good morning.
Good morning, Shelley. Can you just state your name for the record and begin your testimony? Good to see you as well.
Yes, sir. It's good to see you also, Mr. Chairman. I'm Shelley Cameron, CEO of the city's Division of Aviation, which manages both Philadelphia International and the Northeast Philadelphia airports. It is my pleasure to be before you and members of the Committee on Transportation and Public Utilities today. I'm here to testify in support of Bill number 210137, which would create an early retirement window program to benefit Division of Aviation employees near or at retirement age. This bill is supported by District Council 33 and District Council 47. Individuals from my team, as well as finance, are also here to help answer questions. This has been a challenging year for the Division of Aviation. I've spoken with many of you about the impacts that COVID-19 has had on the aviation industry. As you may recall, in 2019, we set a record number of passengers when more than 33 million individuals came through Philadelphia International Airport. Our 2020 passenger data shows that passenger traffic in that year was at its lowest level since 1986. Airports, including PHL and PNE, are designed to be as self-sustaining as possible, and the Division of Aviation does not take any local tax dollars to support our operations. However, airports need passengers coming through them to financially support the operations. Since March of 2020, our financial situation has become dire. Last month, Finance Director Rob Dubois sent a letter to the mayor outlining our projected multi-million-dollar deficits for fiscal years 2021 and 2022. These deficits incorporate various expense reductions that the division has already made since the onset of the pandemic, including exempt pay reductions, overtime restrictions, hiring freezes, debt refinancing, and purchasing cuts to our services, supplies, and equipment. Unfortunately, even though the industry is projecting a temporary increase in traffic this summer and early fall, full recovery is projected to take anywhere from 3 to 5 years. In order to continue to weather this storm and limit further budget deficits, we need to commence with a reduction to our workforce to balance it with diminished operational demands. Our goal in standing up this early retirement program is to provide our employees who are near or at retirement with the ability to make their own decisions regarding their future. Reducing our Class 100 costs through amicable separations will reduce the number of layoffs the Division of Aviation will need to conduct in the future. As a condition of accepting relief funding through the American Rescue Plan, the Division of Aviation is required to retain 90% of our workforce based on March 2020 staffing levels until September 30th, 2021. This employment retention threshold does not include voluntary separations, such as retirement. This early retirement program will temporarily lower the eligible age of retirement without penalty by 5 years for Division of Aviation employees. In addition to temporarily lowering the early retirement age during this window, the program also offers a bonus of $1,000 per full year of city service to all employees that opt in and does not alter the amount of the participant's pension. Individuals that participate in this program and are 59 years of age or younger are also eligible to receive 1 year of COBRA benefits or a $5,000 single sum payment. This additional year would not impact already guaranteed post-service health benefits through the city. Roughly 25% of our workforce is eligible to take advantage of this aspect of the program. If this legislation is passed, employees who are interested in participating will have a 30 calendar day window in which to opt into the program. Opting in will be facilitated by the Division of Aviation's Human Resources staff. Afterwards, participants will have 45 days to review a formal offer from the city plus 7 additional days afterward in which they can opt out. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present testimony today and kindly ask the committee for a favorable recommendation and that the rules be suspended to allow for a second reading at the next session of council.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shelley. Any questions, comments from members of the committee? Hearing none. Councilman Dom, are you ready? Councilman Dom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Shelley. This might be a question for Rob DeBow if he's on. I'm just curious what the financial impact might be on our current pension plan by instituting this. I think it's a good idea. I just want to know what the numbers look like.
Yeah, so our actuary is looking at that. We think that because it will only be a relative, compared to the size of the whole fund, a relatively few number of positions, that it won't have a big impact.
Okay. All right. That's good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Councilman Green, Finance Chair, any questions, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a very quick question, and I was going to ask Shelley this question later, but since she's in front of us today, give me a perspective on your thoughts on how the airport is doing now that we're in the spring and we're starting to see some movement. And the American Rescue Plan was passed a few weeks ago, which I think the airport is scheduled to receive about $115 million, but we're not nearly out of the woods. I know this is one step to help in that regard, but I'm just generally curious how we move forward as we get ready for the budget from the mayor on April 15th.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Councilmember Green. So I think there are two factors that are influencing our recovery right now. And although we are seeing bookings come up in the spring and during the summer, what is still missing from our portfolio are international flights. We have a few flights that will be starting this summer, but nowhere near what we had in the past. That impacts both international travelers as well as connecting travelers. And the second factor is the business traveler still hasn't returned. So a lot of leisure travel is starting to happen. People are starting to make plans as they get vaccinated, but we are not seeing business travel come back in any kind of meaningful way. By way of the numbers, prior to the pandemic, our business traffic was about 45 to 50% of our overall traffic, and recent surveys that we've conducted among travelers show that it's about 10% right now. What that means is that we might see spikes of demand during spring break and the summer and holidays, but the business traffic, which really sustains the operation over time, still hasn't come back, and we feel that that's why our recovery is going to be a bit of time.
And I guess just following up on that and some other information I've seen regarding business travel, with the fact that we've now been in this pandemic for a year and have adapted to using Zoom and Skype and WebEx. And I reflect on the fact, my wife, years ago, she's a travel, this before 9/11, traveled quite a bit when she was doing IT consulting, literally in 3 different cities a week. Now, with all the technology we've become accustomed to, I do have a real concern that our business travel may not get back to where it was, just based on the fact you can do an introductory sales meeting by way of Zoom or Skype or WebEx and then close that meeting at a future in-person trip for that initial meeting. And it'll be a challenge for some industries to even justify that initial meeting by way of travel. Have you started to get a perspective on long-term impact that may have on the airport?
Yes, I agree with you, actually. I'm not sure that business travel ever returns to the level that it was before. I've heard consultants say things like, that overnight trip to London and back the next day for a meeting, probably won't happen. We'll be combining business trips to locations. So I'm not sure that it ever comes back, but if it could at least approach, say, the 40, 50, 60% of prior levels, again, that would help to even us out. And that's really what we're looking for, is some level of business traffic. Again, I absolutely agree with you. I'm not sure that it comes back to the level that it was before, but we're hopeful that some will come back.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Cameron. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I want to ask a question, Shelley, regarding how does this impact not this bill, but just the environment. I know we did a extension of the lease right? And sometime in the near future, we're going to do a full lease renewal. Give me an overview of how the pandemic is going to play a role in the lease renewal. Obviously I'm advocating for, just making sure our workers are supported and protected out at the Philadelphia International Airport. So just give me an idea. And it's tough for all of us right now, so I do understand that clearly for the record. But just give me an overview of where we're at in that process.
Yes, sir. The airlines voted to exercise the final one-year option of our current agreement, which takes us through 30 June of 2022. So we have a little bit more than a year left under our current agreement. We will be in discussions with the airlines later this year to start talking about what a new agreement looks like. And I really am unsure as to how that's going to go. What if I had to make at least one prediction? Say that we would probably not be looking at a large capital investment program to be agreed to by the airlines. They are suffering in a really big way, just like the airport is. It's really our whole industry. And so their appetite for committing to large capital investment really at any airport, I think, is going to be greatly diminished. But again, until we really get those negotiations underway, it'd be difficult to say how they're going to go.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Councilman Allen Dom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to follow up on Councilman Green's question. I do agree that you're not going to see business travel come back. And I think in general, the pandemic, when we look back, will have accelerated everything. It accelerated businesses that were failing to close. It accelerated purchases on the internet. It accelerated businesses that were succeeding to succeed even more. It was like an accelerator of everything, okay? And I know we talked about this, and I know you're ramping it up, but I'm just wondering, what else can we do to pivot and take advantage of that acceleration? Example, can we make the airport an Amazon hub or something like that? Can we benefit from all the shipping that goes on now, all these packages and what's going on over the internet, and pivot the airport way more and have the city help you do this? So that's really my question.
Yes, sir. You hit the nail on the head. The one bright spot during this pandemic for our industry and other airports has been cargo. And we are in a uniquely advantageous position where we have property that we acquired on the western border of the airport, and our airport master plan calls for that to be developed for cargo. We have a couple of enabling projects underway. You may have heard about that we've partnered with Parks and Rec to do wetlands mitigation in FDR Park that will allow us to fully develop the site. And we are in the process of designing a relocation of Tinicum Island Road. What kind of help we would need would of course be funding. We believe that an infrastructure package at the federal level will help to provide some money for additional enabling projects to make that cargo development a reality. We're hopeful that the state will participate with us, and I know that the city is in a tough spot financially as well. Everybody is these days, but really it's a little bit of investment in some of those enabling projects, things like extending the runway to the new site that a developer isn't going to come in and do themselves, but we need just a little bit of help for those enabling projects to then entice the developers to come in and build out. Again, I think that's really the best way to help at this point.
I would say this: whatever we can do to help you, we should do that. Be it our council or our administration, or state reps and state senators, or congressmen or senators, whatever. We should form a coalition and work together, because the success of the airport, to a large degree, is going to depend on how well we pivot into this new economy. And then the last question I have for you is: I know you're very involved with airports all over the country. Are there any airports in other cities that are doing successful things that we should be looking at?
This pandemic has hit airports very differently. And airports in different parts of the country are coming back quicker than others. The Northeast airports and those on the West Coast are coming back a lot slower than others. If you have beaches or mountains, as we keep saying, those airports, leisure destinations are coming back a lot quicker. We have already, we actually set the pace in terms of an airline incentive program to try and make sure that our airlines come back and add back in the service that we lost. As a result of the pandemic, we're down about 30% in terms of nonstop destinations. That's on top of the traffic levels that have declined and everything else. We put into place a program that with a little bit of help from the state that is providing some financial incentives, again, for airlines to come back quicker to Philadelphia. And it's been very successful so far. So I think that's one. And then we're seeing a lot of other airports do cargo work, again, cargo development. Our opportunity is very unique, though, because we have land upon which to expand. But a lot of airports are trying to get more into that cargo game. We have land and we have access to this densely populated Northeast corridor, which is a real advantage for Philadelphia over some other airports.
Last question is, have your employees been vaccinated?
Well, that's a good question. Those who are in the 1A or 1B category are starting to get vaccinations, I'm hearing. Unfortunately, transit employees were included in the 1B category. Other transportation employees were not. And so the vaccine is not widely available to my staff or the other. We have about 16,000 employees left at the airport with all of the other companies. We have worked really hard to design a vaccine clinic plan that has been blessed by a number of officials. We're essentially ready to go if we can get an allocation of the vaccine to set up a clinic on site to make it easier for our employees to get vaccinated. Many airports across the country have received support from their states and other jurisdictions to be in that 1B category. By example, the New York, New Jersey airports, the Port Authority, those employees are in the 1B category and are mostly vaccinated. Again, we were in the 1C. Philadelphia and Pennsylvania chose to follow CDC guidelines. We're getting close, though. I feel like the vaccine is becoming more widely available. And again, we are ready with a week or two's notice to stand up a clinic on site at the airport for the employees that work here.
Mr. Chairman, maybe we could speak to our health commissioner about getting the airport employees vaccinated. I think that's kind of like crucial. And I'm happy to work with you on that, whatever we can do. But
sure,
we got to get them vaccinated. That's crazy.
Absolutely, Alan. Let's follow up after this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, one other challenging aspect to the vaccine that I need to throw in, and I'm sorry I didn't earlier, is when you look at the city of Philadelphia employees, we, of course, all live in the city of Philadelphia, but when you look at the 16,000 employee population number, those folks are from New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and a number of counties in Pennsylvania. So that's a real challenge to overwork those jurisdictional challenges. So anyway, thank you for your support.
It's important for the employees to be vaccinated at the airport. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I want to also acknowledge the presence of Councilman Mark Squilla. Before I call on you, Mark, can I call on Councilman Derek Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick follow-up question. I was curious what you may be seeing from a convention perspective, because that's also another way that will help to bring back travel to the city. I know I've seen an uptick in reservations and bookings from what I've been hearing and some of the things I've been reading for vacation travel, because I think there is a lot of pent-up demand, as you were saying, based on the fact of a one-year pandemic and that people are now getting vaccinated. But are you starting to see, and I've had a lot of conversations with Jeff Garcino from Visit Philly, Greg Karen from PCVB, but are you all starting to see possible uptick in bookings or potential bookings for conventions, not necessarily this year, but for next year.
Thank you, Council Member, for the question. We don't have a ton of insight into conventions other than what we get through PHLCVB and Visit Philly, as you already mentioned. Anecdotally, though, I can comment on airport conventions and business meetings, and it looks like the fall, there are a few of them that are going to happen again. So, I don't know. I just, I'm crossing my fingers and toes and praying, and that folks will feel more comfortable. Some of the survey work I have seen, and you've probably heard this as well when you've talked to Greg and Jeff, is that conventions will probably be something that does come back. It's a way for people within industries to connect and network, and so we do feel pretty positive that conventions at some level will come back. I don't have much more insight than that, though.
Thank you. It seems like for some of the organizations I'm involved in, those for the early part of the fall will probably still be virtual, but some for the latter part of the fall may be a hybrid or actually possibly in person. I would agree with you that conventions, I think there's a pent-up demand for conventions, just like a pent-up demand for hospitality, travel in the tourism area, because unlike commercial travel, where you can have a meeting, conversation via Zoom or WebEx or any of these other platforms, for a convention, and I've attended a number of conventions this year virtually, it doesn't have quite the same dynamic. And I think people are very looking forward to doing some of the things that happen at conventions, which are meeting with people and peers, and those conversations that only occur at that location where people are physically gathered in a space. And although they try to emulate a lot of that through technology, is still just not the same. So I think there definitely will be a pent-up demand for conventions and opportunities for people to gather and exchange information in person, because being on a Zoom call for a conference or a seminar or even an exhibit hall is not the same thing like actually being in that space. So thank you, Ms. Cameron. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
You're welcome. Councilman Mark Squilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my question was along with Councilmember Green's question about the sort of the convention industry, but also the tourism industry. And obviously, as we start opening things up, it'll be more of a reason for people to come. But the other question was, as far as businesses at the airport, and as we see the fall off of the businesses because of the lack of travel. And I know there was some assistance from the federal government. But do we see that there will be a possibility of anybody closing or needed assistance from us as we move forward?
Thank you, Council Member. It's a really good question. So a couple things. In addition to the small business programs that you probably already heard about, part of our funding under the ARP includes a carve out for our concession programs. So any of the airport concessions will be getting additional relief. We actually kicked it into high gear last year and provided relief to a number of our, in fact, all of our concession operators as well. So we've already been providing relief and we will continue to do so. We've really done that with an eye on inclusion and equity issues. At this point, I can tell you of the 160 concession operators in the terminal, I believe 100% or very close to 100% of our ACDBE, Airport Concession Disadvantaged Business Enterprise operators, are back. We brought them back as soon as we possibly could. And, we will continue to do that to try and make sure that we focus on those minority women-owned businesses, local small businesses, to make sure that they can succeed. In terms of businesses that haven't made it, there are just a couple that I'm aware of. Travelex that provided currency exchange services went out of business as a result of the pandemic. And I don't know that, I think we're going to struggle with a duty-free operator, but, the international traffic is so low. But other than that, we don't know the full impact yet, I don't think, but as soon as it's possible, we've been trying to bring back concession operators so they can try to at least get a little bit of money.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for all your hard work through this pandemic and together. Looking forward to more of a brighter side as we move forward. So thanks for your work.
Thank you, Councilman Squilla. Any other questions and comments from members of the committee? Councilman Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my last question, I promise. So it's a financial question, really. In the past, the airport financed a lot of its budget with short-term revenue anticipation notes. And the debt service, it looks like it's like 25% roughly of what the airport generates locally. So going forward, how is the airport handling the debt service on those deals? And has the pandemic changed your approach to short-term financing, basically?
It's a good question as well. I'm going to ask Tracy Border, our CFO, to answer the question.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Councilmember Dom. We have not changed our approach at this time. We are fortunate that we have a commercial paper program in place. So as we embark on capital projects, we are able to use commercial paper, which is extremely low interest rates, and keep it in commercial paper until such time as we want to do a future takeout with bonds. But for the bonds that we do have in place right now, one, we did a refunding last year in 2020 of our 2010 bonds, so we were able to lower our debt service payments. We're also in the process of refunding our 2011 bonds late this spring. So we will continue to lower our debt service payments. In fact, we're going to structure the savings to be more upfront than spread out evenly, because we anticipate the next few years being our roughest years to get through until recovery is upon us. So we're hoping that will help ease this burden during the next few years. We'll use the commercial paper program in the interim to help us muddle through this time and still continue to embark on the state of good repair projects and things that we need to still do here. And we do envision, we've been really fortunate that CARES Act and CRISA and ARP is here to help us with those debt service payments. But if not, we are looking at obviously our revenues, and we do see our revenues being enough to make debt service payments and cover costs. We've done our best at lowering all of our operating expenditures, contractual services, materials and supplies and equipment. We've made severe cuts everywhere to try to, weather this storm. And now we're before you because we're also looking at personnel as a way to keep our expenditures, more balanced as well while we continue through to recovery. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer. One question on that: the rates for commercial paper today versus the rates for the bonds. What are the rates?
The bonds are like an all-in rate would probably be between 3% and 4%, say 3.5% on average. The rates for commercial paper range from anywhere from 0.4% to 0.7%. It's very low. So we're very fortunate to have that program in place.
So here's my question. You don't know when the bottom is, but it looks like right now it could be the bottom. Because with all the money being injected into the economy, we're probably going to have inflation at some point. And at what point do you switch from that commercial paper to the fixed rate and take advantage of the best rates possible? I've seen in my lifetime.
Right, I know, agreed. It's, timing is a bear, right? Because it's also one of the toughest times to go before investors and rating agencies at this moment with where we are. So it's a catch-22 at the moment because the rates are fabulous. And we probably won't go before them except for a refunding, which is what most airports are doing right now. We will continue to monitor it. We don't necessarily see it skyrocketing tomorrow. So we absolutely work with our financial advisors, and we'll continue to monitor that so that we can take advantage of fixing out our commercial paper. Some of it is taxable for land purchases we've made over the years, and so we won't necessarily fix those out until we have an ultimate airport use of those properties, so that we can do non-AMT and AMT debt, which will be lower interest rates than taxable for long term.
On commercial paper, you can't buy an interest rate cap, can you?
I don't think so. But I have never seen that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you both.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilman Dom. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Well, thank you, Shelley. Keep up the good work. We also want to acknowledge you for being appointed chair of the U.S. Policy Council for Airports Council International. So keep up the good work as well. And
thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time. If there are any other individuals who are here to testify on this bill, we will take a brief pause before we go into a public meeting. This concludes the public hearing of the committee. We will now go into a public meeting to consider the action to be taken on the bill before this committee today. We will now convene the public meeting and take a roll call to make sure that all members are in the presence. All members who are in attendance will please say by saying present when your names are called. Also, please say a brief few words when responding so that your image will be displayed on the screen when you speak. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mark Squilla.
Present.
David O.
I'm present.
Kendra Brooks.
I'm present.
Alan Dom.
Present.
And Derek Green.
Present.
Thank you. We will now officially go into our public meeting. The chair recognizes Councilman Mark Squilla for a motion on bill number 210137.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the bill number 210137 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended as to permit the first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second. Councilmember Derek Green.
The chair notes for the record that Councilman Derek Green seconds the motion, and Councilman David O seconds the motion. It has now been moved and properly seconded that bill number 210137 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. This concludes the meeting. If there are no additional remarks, I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their schedule for being here today, and this concludes the meeting of the Transportation and Public Utilities Committee. Thank you, everyone, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all. Thank you, Shelley, Tracy.
Thank you.
Shelley,
Good
good luck.
Thank you so much.